Johnny Carson, the unforgettable king of late-night television, ruled the airwaves for 30 years, with a silver tongue, a calm voice, and a charm so smooth it felt like velvet to anyone watching across America every single night. And while millions tuned in to laugh at his jokes, hear his interviews, and see stars promoted in ways only Johnny could pull off, there were rare, unforgettable moments when things didn't go according to plan, moments when the cool and collected host found himself back.
I suppose the thing is to get it when you can.
Are you whispering again?
Oh, no, you said I'm whispering last time.
Yeah, you talk very softly for me. I don't know why.
Are you hearing me
This
right
is what
in?
you sound like.
Okay.
You're talking. You made a book. No. Why? I think so.
Have you seen those little whisper things that people get who are just on the edge of going completely deaf, where you hear something? I'm going to get you
think
one
it's
of those.
me?
Yeah. I think you're losing it.
Well, maybe it is me. And now you want to know why I mistreat you.
That's right. Now people don't understand when you come out here. And
Well, but look at you. I mean, you don't really care what I have to say, do you? Honestly?
No.
Into corners, facing guests who didn't follow the script, bringing tension into a room where laughter usually lived. And those moments, captured live and unrehearsed, revealed a side of Johnny Carson few people ever saw, a side that was sharp, defensive, protective of his domain, and fully human. And it's in those moments, the breaking points, that we truly begin to understand the price of being the calm center of a swirling storm for 3 decades. Because while Johnny managed to maintain his smile and sense of humor most of the time, even he had limits. And when pushed past those limits, the result wasn't just shocking television, it was cultural history. And today we're going to revisit the 3 most intense arguments ever to take place on The Tonight Show. Moments when the usually untouchable Carson showed fire behind the eyes and thunder in his voice. Because being a late-night host doesn't just mean cracking jokes, it means navigating egos, defending boundaries, and sometimes standing up for yourself when the cameras are still rolling. And the first unforgettable clash came not from a political guest or activist, but from someone Johnny knew well, the hilariously dangerous Don Rickles, who had a reputation for attacking everyone with his biting insults. And during an episode guest hosted by Bob Newhart, Rickles went off the rails, smashing Johnny's prized cigarette box that had become something of a fixture on his desk. And when Johnny returned and discovered what happened, he didn't just laugh it off. Instead, in a rare act of real emotion, he marched over to the set of CPO Sharkey during a live taping, barged in with the broken box in hand, and began scolding Rickles right in front of his crew and audience. And while some of it was played for laughs, there was something raw in Johnny's voice, a spark of real frustration that showed viewers how much he valued control, tradition, and respect for the set he'd built over decades. And Rickles, usually the alpha male in any room, suddenly looked nervous, apologizing with his usual fake humility, and the audience didn't know whether to laugh or cringe. Because this wasn't just a skit, it was Carson unsettled. And while he regained composure by the end, the moment left a lasting impression. But that wasn't the only time Johnny found himself in hot water with a guest who didn't follow the rules. Because when Cher appeared on the show, young and bold, full of confidence, she made the mistake of telling the truth that struck Johnny harder than anyone expected. Because during their interview, when Johnny was being his usual charming self and trying to banter, Cher casually admitted that she'd once called him a jerk, and the audience gasped. Some laughed nervously, but Johnny stopped smiling, and something shifted in the room, and he asked her to explain, to clarify. And while she tried to backpedal, saying it was a joke, something she'd said in passing, Johnny didn't let it go, and what followed was a long, uncomfortable back and forth, where Carson pressed her harder and harder, clearly hurt by the offhand insult, trying to understand if she really meant it or if it was just a cheap laugh. And for the first time, Cher seemed out of her depth, realizing that she'd struck a nerve, that this wasn't the host she expected, and Johnny, usually cool and quick to forgive, just wouldn't move on. And for viewers at home, it was like watching your parents argue at the dinner table. Tense, confusing, and oddly intimate, because it wasn't about the insult, it was about pride, image, and a man who had spent his whole career being liked by everyone suddenly facing a guest who wasn't afraid to tell the world she hadn't always liked him. And then came the most intense, most unforgettable argument of them all, the confrontation with musician Ray Conniff, who turned his guest appearance into a political protest during what was supposed to be a lighthearted episode celebrating America's bite. And Conniff, with microphone in hand and cameras rolling, launched into a surprise speech criticizing U.S. foreign policy and the Vietnam War, holding up signs and turning The Tonight Show into a platform for activism. And Johnny, who believed firmly in keeping politics off his stage, was furious, cutting Conniff off, confronting him on air, and telling him that while everyone had a right to speak, this wasn't the place for it. And the argument escalated quickly, with both men raising their voices, Johnny visibly shaking with anger, defending his show and its audience from being used without consent, and Conniff standing his ground, claiming moral responsibility. And the crowd didn't know how to react. Was this bravery or betrayal, free speech or hijacking? And in the end, Johnny shut it down, ending the segment early, walking off stage without a handshake, and the moment made headlines the next day, splitting the public and forever changing the way guests behaved on the show. And these arguments weren't just TV moments, they were windows into Carson's soul, revealing a man who valued professionalism, respect, and integrity above all. A man who would endure anything for the sake of the show, but would rise up the moment he felt cornered or disrespected. And it's here where we can draw a parallel to another performer from the same era, Grace Lee Whitney, known to fans as Janice Rand from Star Trek, who also faced betrayal behind the scenes. Not in the form of on-air conflict, but in a quiet, devastating moment of exploitation and abandonment. Because Grace, like Johnny, lived in a world where the cameras captured smiles and perfection, but behind closed doors, the truth was far more painful. And just as Johnny had to fight to maintain his dignity on live TV, Grace had to fight for her voice after being silenced for decades, after being sexually assaulted by a studio executive, and fired without warning. And while their stories are different, the emotional thread connecting them is that both stood on sets where people expected them to perform, to entertain, to play roles written by others. And yet both found themselves in situations where the reality of power, betrayal, and public image collided in ways that left scars. And if we think about it, The Tonight Show and Star Trek weren't just TV shows, they were symbols of a time, of American imagination and late-night comfort, and yet both shows had moments where the polished image cracked, and what poured out was raw, unfiltered humanity. And the reason we remember Johnny Carson's arguments isn't just because they were rare, but because they felt real, like brief flashes of lightning that lit up the truth behind the stage lights, showing us that even legends have limits, even icons have bad nights, and even the most practiced host in television history can be pushed too far. And in those moments, he wasn't just a host, he was a man defending his name, his values, and his home turf. And that's why these arguments matter, not just as anecdotes, but as defining moments that remind us how much strength it takes to stand in the spotlight and still hold your ground when everything around you wants you to stay quiet and smile. And whether you're a host like Johnny Carson or a performer like Grace Lee Whitney, the moment you choose to speak up, to defend yourself, to stand up against disrespect or injustice, you stop being just a part of the entertainment machine and become something more, something real, something lasting, and something worth remembering.